The moment my grandfather yanked me through the front door, I knew I had made a terrible mistake. His hand clamped around my wrist with surprising strength for an 81-year-old man. Before I could even ask what was happening, he slammed the deadbolt, pulled every curtain shut in one frantic motion, and pressed a trembling finger against his lips. "Don't say a word," he whispered. His breathing was ragged. Then he looked straight into my eyes. "Get inside. Hide." I froze. This was not the grandfather I remembered. The man who used to laugh so hard he cried while teaching me how to fish. The man who made blueberry pancakes every Saturday morning. The man who never locked his front door because, as he liked to say, good neighbors are better than fancy alarm systems. Now he looked terrified, not confused, not sick, terrified. A car rolled slowly past the house. Grandpa didn't even blink. He crouched beneath the front window and carefully lifted one corner of the curtain, just enough to peek outside. "They saw your car," he muttered. My heart started pounding. "Grandpa, who's they?" He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed my overnight bag, hurried down the hallway, and shoved me into the old laundry room. "If anyone knocks," he whispered, "you were never here." Then he closed the door. I stood there in complete silence. The old washing machine smelled like detergent and dust. Pipes rattled inside the walls. Outside, I heard footsteps moving through the house. Then, 3 loud knocks echoed from the front door. Every muscle in my body locked. Someone spoke. A man's voice. "Morning, Frank." Grandpa answered almost immediately. "Didn't expect visitors. We noticed a blue SUV pull into your driveway." My stomach dropped. That was my SUV. "I haven't seen anyone." A pause. Then the stranger laughed. "You've always been a terrible liar." 3 days earlier, none of this had made any sense. I hadn't seen Grandpa Frank in nearly 8 months. Life kept getting in the way. Work. Bills. The endless excuses adults make until they suddenly realize they've let too much time pass. When I finally called him that Tuesday evening, he didn't answer. Neither did he answer Wednesday. Or Thursday. That wasn't like him. Grandpa answered every call. Even spam callers. Especially spam callers. He thought hanging up on people was rude. So Friday morning, I requested one vacation day from work, packed a small overnight bag, and drove 4 hours to the tiny mountain town where he'd lived for almost 50 years. Pine Ridge wasn't much more than one grocery store, a diner, a gas station, and rows of old houses hidden among towering pine trees. Nothing ever happened there. At least, that's what everyone believed. As I drove through town, something immediately felt off. People weren't outside. The diner parking lot, usually full before breakfast, had only 2 cars. Several storefronts were closed even though it was almost 10 in the morning. A sheriff's cruiser sat outside the hardware store. The deputy inside wasn't talking to anyone. He was simply watching traffic, watching everyone. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe there had been a storm. Maybe everyone was attending some local event. Small towns always had strange rhythms. I turned onto Grandpa's road. His mailbox leaned exactly the way I remembered. The old tire swing still hung from the giant oak tree. The vegetable garden looked overgrown. That surprised me. Grandpa loved that garden. He treated every tomato like royalty. When I parked in the driveway, I smiled. The house hadn't changed at all. White paint, green shutters, front porch lined with rocking chairs, wind chimes dancing softly in the breeze. Home. I grabbed my bag and walked toward the front steps. The moment I knocked, everything changed. Instead of hearing Grandpa cheerfully yell, "Doors open," I heard hurried footsteps. Several locks clicked. The door cracked open barely 2 inches. One frightened, I looked through the gap. It took several seconds before recognition replaced fear. "Oh!" His shoulders relaxed slightly. "It's you." Before I could smile, he jerked the door wide open, pulled me inside, and whispered those unforgettable words. "Get inside. Hide." Back in the laundry room, I struggled to hear the conversation through the walls. The stranger's voice remained calm, almost friendly, which somehow made it worse. "You sure nobody's visiting?" "I've been alone. You wouldn't mind if we looked around?" There was silence. Then Grandpa chuckled awkwardly. "You've got a warrant?" "No." "Then no." Another long pause. I imagined both men staring at each other. Finally the stranger sighed. "All right, Frank." Footsteps retreated across the porch. A car engine started, then another. Only after several minutes did Grandpa open the laundry room door. His face had turned pale. "They'll be back." I stared at him. "What is going on?" He rubbed both hands across his face. "I hoped you'd never come here. I came because you stopped answering." "I know." "Then explain." Instead of answering, he walked into the kitchen. The familiar room suddenly felt unfamiliar. Every cabinet had new locks. The back door had heavy steel bars installed. Even the windows had reinforced screws. Who fortifies a farmhouse? Grandpa poured 2 cups of coffee. His hands shook so badly, he spilled some onto the counter. "I need you to leave." I blinked. "What?" "You need to drive back home." "I'm not leaving until you tell me what's happening." "You can't help." "I didn't come here to help." He looked at me. "I came because I was worried." For a brief second, I saw my real grandfather again. The gentle smile. The kind eyes. Then they disappeared beneath fear. He sat down. "I made a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "The kind you don't survive." Grandpa had spent 43 years working as a surveyor. Most people thought he simply measured property lines. In reality, he'd spent decades hiking forests, mapping mountains, and documenting abandoned mines throughout the county. He knew every inch of those woods, every trail, every cave, every forgotten road. "I found something," he finally admitted. "When?" "About 6 months ago." "What?" "I don't know." That answer irritated me. "What do you mean you don't know?" "I found a place." "What place?" He hesitated, then leaned closer. "There shouldn't have been buildings there." I frowned. "What buildings?" "They don't exist on any county maps." The room fell silent. I waited. Grandpa continued. "I thought maybe someone built hunting cabins." "So, there were 8 buildings." He swallowed. "No roads. No power lines. No mailboxes. No addresses. Just there." "And?" I got closer. His breathing became shallow. "They weren't cabins." "What were they?" "I still don't know." According to Grandpa, every building had identical gray walls. No windows. Heavy steel doors. Tall fences. Security cameras. People wearing matching uniforms. Vehicles without license plates. It looked military. Maybe it was. I checked. He shook his head. "The county has no record. The state has no record." I even contacted an old friend in the National Guard. "What did he say?" "He told me to forget I ever saw it." That didn't sound real. It sounded like one of those internet conspiracy theories. Grandpa noticed the doubt on my face. "You don't believe me?" "I'm trying. I took pictures." My eyebrows lifted. "You have them." He looked away. "They took my camera." "Who?" "The men who just visited." A chill crawled down my spine. Over the next hour, Grandpa revealed pieces of a story that became stranger with every sentence. 2 weeks after discovering the compound, unfamiliar vehicles began driving past his house. People followed him at the grocery store. His mail disappeared. His phone stopped working randomly. Neighbors suddenly avoided him. One neighbor even crossed the street rather than say hello. "They're scared," Grandpa whispered. "Of what?" "Being associated with me." "You went to the sheriff." "I did." "What happened?" "He told me I should stop wandering through private property." "That's it." "He already knew." I stared. "He knew." "Everyone important in town knows." I wanted to dismiss everything as paranoia, old age, stress, loneliness, but something kept bothering me. The reinforced doors, the strange visitors, the deputy watching traffic. None of that fit. My phone buzzed. I glanced down. No signal. Not one bar. Odd. 5 minutes earlier I'd had full reception while driving into town. Now, nothing. Grandpa noticed. They blocked signals. I almost laughed. Instead, I walked outside onto the porch. Still nothing. I restarted the phone. Nothing. When I looked across the road, a black pickup truck sat beneath the trees. The engine wasn't running. Someone sat inside, watching the house. The moment I looked directly at it, the truck slowly drove away. I hurried back inside. "Grandpa, I know." Someone was watching. "I told you." For the first time since arriving, I believed him. That afternoon, while Grandpa napped in his recliner, I decided to look around the house. Not because I distrusted him, because I felt he wasn't telling me everything. His bedroom looked untouched. The guest room was exactly as I remembered. Then I entered his small office. The walls were covered with maps, hundreds of handwritten notes. Strings connected different locations with colored pushpins. Dates, coordinates, vehicle descriptions, license plate numbers, times. It looked obsessive, until I realized every note was written with perfect precision. Grandpa wasn't guessing. He had documented everything. One map caught my attention. A red circle surrounded a section of forest nearly 12 miles north of town. Inside the circle he'd written only 3 words. Don't go alone. I opened the top desk drawer. Empty. Second drawer. Old tax papers. Third drawer. Locked. Interesting. Grandpa had never locked drawers. I searched around the office until I found a tiny brass key taped beneath the desk. When the drawer opened, my breath caught. Inside sat a worn leather journal, a folded map, a small flash drive, and one faded photograph. The photograph showed Grandpa standing beside an old wooden trail marker. Behind him, partially hidden among the trees, was a large gray building, exactly as he described. No windows, no markings, no signs, only one strange symbol painted near the roof. A black circle with 3 white lines running through its center. Someone had tried scratching the symbol out with a knife. On the back of the photograph, Grandpa had written just one sentence. If you're reading this, they already know. I reached for the journal. Suddenly, the floorboards creaked behind me. A voice spoke quietly. You weren't supposed to find that. I turned. Grandpa stood in the doorway, but he wasn't looking at me. He was staring past me, at the office window. His face drained of color. They found us first. Grandpa didn't blink. He didn't gasp. He simply whispered, with a calmness that scared me even more than panic would have. They're early. I turned toward the office window. At first, I saw nothing but the gravel driveway, the old oak tree, and my blue SUV. Then movement. A man in a dark baseball cap stepped out from behind the tree. Another appeared beside the mailbox. Neither one looked toward the house. They acted like neighbors taking a walk. Too casual, too practiced. Then a black SUV rolled slowly to the edge of the driveway. It didn't pull in. It just waited. Grandpa reached over and quietly closed the curtains. They've never come this close during daylight. Who are they? I wish I knew. You've been watching them for months. I've been surviving them for months. There was a difference, one I'd only begun to understand. He grabbed the journal from my hands. Come with me. Instead of heading toward the front door, he walked into the kitchen. Then he knelt beside the pantry. He removed 3 shelves. Behind them was a narrow wooden panel. I stared. I've been coming here since I was 5. He smiled weakly. You've never looked behind the canned beans. The panel swung open. A narrow staircase disappeared into darkness. There was a basement. It wasn't always. We climbed down. The smell hit me immediately. Old earth, wood, machine oil. The room wasn't large, maybe 15 feet across. Shelves lined every wall. Not with food, with boxes, maps, old radios, battery packs, binders, laminated aerial photographs, 3 laptops, a police scanner, 2 generators, even bottled water stacked nearly to the ceiling. What? I built this after your grandmother died. You never told anyone. I never needed to. Until now. He switched on a dim lantern. The walls glowed amber. For the first time, I noticed hundreds of tiny marks scratched into a wooden beam. Dates. Every single day. For 6 months. 1 scratch per day. He hadn't missed one. Grandpa spread a county map across an old workbench. This is where I first saw them. He pointed toward a valley north of Pine Ridge. I leaned closer. I've hiked there. So have I. There was never anything. There wasn't. When did it appear? That's the question. He slid another photograph toward me. This one was older. Same location. No buildings. Only trees. The date stamped across the bottom read, April 17th. Another photo. June 3rd. Gray buildings. 8 of them. My stomach tightened. They built all of this in less than 7 weeks. Apparently. Nobody noticed. They made sure they didn't. Before I could ask another question, static exploded from the police scanner. Black SUV, leaving Franklin Road. Another voice interrupted. Maintain observation only. Observation. Not arrest. Not investigation. Observation. Grandpa shut the radio off immediately. They monitor local frequencies. You think they heard us? I don't take chances anymore. The sentence sounded rehearsed, like he'd repeated it hundreds of times. That evening, the power went out. Everything went dark. The refrigerator hummed to silence. Outside, the entire neighborhood disappeared into blackness. Storm? I asked. Grandpa looked out the window. No wind. No rain. No thunder. Nothing. Just darkness. Then, the black SUV's headlights switched on. Only theirs. It sat across the road, perfectly still, watching. They cut the power. You know that. They've done it before. Call the electric company. He gave me a tired look. My phone hasn't connected to anyone in 5 months. I pulled mine out. Still no signal. Not even emergency calls. I suddenly realized something. The house across the street. Its lights were on. So they didn't cut everyone's power. No. Just yours. He nodded. Around 9 o'clock, someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Neither of us moved. Another 3. Then a voice. Frank. Grandpa's shoulder stiffened. It's Walter. He relaxed just enough to unlock the door. Walter Benson shuffled inside carrying a flashlight. He had to be in his late 70s. Thin. Gray beard. Flannel jacket. He smiled when he saw me. So you're finally here. You know me. I knew you'd come eventually. That wasn't the greeting I expected. Walter sat down without being invited. He looked exhausted. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes. You tell him, he asked Grandpa. Most of it. Walter sighed. You might as well tell him the rest. An hour later, my understanding of everything changed. Walter hadn't been Grandpa's fishing buddy. He'd been his surveying partner. For 31 years, the two of them had discovered the compound together. But Walter had gone closer. Much closer. I crossed the fence. Grandpa stared at him. You promised never to say that. I don't care anymore. I looked between them. What did you see? Walter rubbed his hands together. They were unloading crates. What kind of crates? No markings. Military. I thought so. He swallowed hard. Until one opened. And there weren't weapons. What was inside? Walter's voice cracked. People. Silence. I blinked. What do you mean people? They were alive. The room felt suddenly colder. They weren't tied up. They weren't prisoners. They just... He struggled to find the words. Stood there, doing nothing. No talking. No expressions. They just waited. I wanted to reject everything I was hearing. It sounded impossible. Yet neither man looked like they were telling stories. Walter's hands shook uncontrollably. Grandpa wouldn't even look at him. What happened after that? Walter stared at the floor. They saw me. My heartbeat quickened. I ran. Did they chase you? No. They just watched. That's worse. I know. Walter stood to leave around 10. Before opening the door, he handed Grandpa a folded envelope. I found another one. Grandpa opened it. Inside was a single photograph. I watched every bit of color disappear from his face. What? I asked. He silently handed it to me. It showed this very house, taken from above, probably a drone. In the photograph, a red X had been drawn across the roof. Nothing else. No message. No signature. Just the X. Walter left without another word. Grandpa locked every lock. Then every deadbolt. Then he pushed a heavy oak cabinet in front of the front door. You do this every night. Every single night. I couldn't sleep. Not after everything I'd heard. Around midnight, I walked quietly into the living room. Grandpa was already awake, sitting in the dark, holding an old hunting rifle across his lap. You expecting trouble? I'm expecting company. At exactly 1:17 a.m., headlights appeared. One vehicle. Then another. Then 3 more. None entered the driveway. They stopped along the road. Engines idling. Doors never opened. No one came out. 5 black SUVs. Perfectly spaced. Watching. They remained there. For almost 2 hours. Doing absolutely nothing. I don't know why that frightened me more than if they'd attacked. Eventually they drove away together. Without a sound. The next morning, I made a decision. I'm going. Grandpa looked up from his coffee. Where? The compound. No. You want answers. I want you alive. I'll be careful. No. You can't stop me. I can. His voice was sharper than I'd ever heard. You don't understand what you're walking into. Then help me understand. They want people to come looking. The sentence lingered. They've left clues on purpose. So you followed them? I almost did. What changed? He looked toward the family photographs, hanging on the wall. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the question that had been bothering me since arriving. Why didn't you tell Mom? He closed his eyes. I tried. What happened? She thought I was losing my mind. My chest tightened. When was this? Christmas. That explained everything. Mom had called after Christmas. She told me Grandpa was becoming forgetful. That he was imagining people watching him. That maybe it was time to discuss assisted living. I had believed her. Completely. Now, I wasn't so sure. A vehicle engine echoed outside. We both looked through the curtain. It wasn't another black SUV. It was a county sheriff's cruiser. Deputy Miles climbed out. Young. Maybe 30. Friendly smile. The same deputy I'd seen near the hardware store. He tipped his hat. Morning, Frank. Grandpa didn't answer. The deputy knocked. I just wanted to check on you. Grandpa stayed silent. I know your grandson's here. My pulse jumped. How? The deputy continued. No reason to hide. Hide. The exact word Grandpa had used. We just need to ask him a few questions. Grandpa whispered. Don't move. The deputy smiled through the window. I know you're listening. Then, he looked directly at the office window. The very room where I'd found the journal. Almost like he knew exactly what I'd discovered. He spoke one final sentence before walking back toward his cruiser. You should ask your grandfather what happened to Emily. The engine started. Seconds later, he was gone. I turned slowly toward Grandpa. His face had gone ghost white. The coffee mug slipped from his trembling hands and shattered across the kitchen floor. Grandpa! He didn't answer. Instead, he whispered a name I'd never heard before. She wasn't supposed to die. The mug shattered against the kitchen floor. Coffee spread across the old wooden boards while Grandpa stood frozen, staring at the broken pieces as if they belonged to someone else. I had never seen him look defeated. Not when Grandma died. Not when he lost his best friend Walter's wife. Not even after surviving a heart attack 6 years earlier. But hearing the name Emily, it was like watching a man relive the worst day of his life. I slowly stepped closer. Grandpa! He still didn't move. Who was Emily? His lips parted. No words came out. I asked again. Who was she? Finally, he whispered. My biggest mistake. He sat at the kitchen table for nearly 10 minutes before speaking again. I never wanted you involved. I already am. I know. He rubbed his tired eyes. Emily Parker was 28. She worked for the county newspaper. A reporter. He nodded. One of the last real reporters left around here. She didn't chase celebrity gossip. She investigated corruption. What did she find? Me. I frowned. You. I made the mistake of telling her what I'd discovered. 6 months earlier, Grandpa had tried everything. The sheriff ignored him. The county commissioners refused to meet. The state environmental office claimed no construction permits existed. Nobody wanted answers. Emily had been different. According to Grandpa, she'd shown up with a notebook, a camera, and more determination than caution. She believed him immediately, not because she trusted old men, because she'd already been investigating unexplained government land purchases around Pine Ridge. You weren't the first person to notice strange things, Grandpa said. You were just the first one willing to talk. Emily spent 3 weeks documenting everything. She interviewed former construction workers, survey crews, utility companies, hunters, everyone. Several people admitted seeing trucks entering the forest at night. Others described hearing helicopters with no lights. One man claimed he'd been paid cash to deliver concrete to an unnamed location. Then, he disappeared. His family said he'd moved to Arizona. Nobody believed it. Grandpa opened the leather journal. Most pages contained maps, dates, coordinates. Then he stopped near the middle. A folded newspaper clipping fell onto the table. The headline read, Local reporter killed in single-seer accident. I remembered seeing it. Barely. It had happened months ago. Just another tragic accident. Grandpa slid another photograph beside it. My blood ran cold. The picture showed Emily's car. Only, it wasn't wrapped around a tree like the newspaper claimed. It sat perfectly upright, parked, every window shattered, the driver's door hanging open. No skid marks, no impact, no tree, no accident. Who took this? I did. You were there. I arrived 15 minutes after they called it in. Why? Emily phoned me. What did she say? Grandpa looked at the table. She said, his voice cracked, they're following me. She never finished the sentence. The call disconnected. Grandpa drove toward the meeting spot they'd arranged. Instead, he found flashing lights, deputies, an ambulance, yellow tape. Deputy Miles was already there. Even then, even before today, the same deputy, the same smile, the same calm voice. He told me she lost control. And you believed him? I wanted to, but there wasn't a scratch on the road. I looked back at the newspaper clipping. The official story suddenly felt manufactured. Everything about it did. Grandpa folded the clipping carefully. I buried this instead of throwing it away. Why? So I'd never forget. Around noon, Walter returned unexpectedly. He wasn't alone. A woman stepped out of his pickup. She looked to be in her late 40s. Athletic, dark hair tied into a ponytail, sun-weathered face. She carried herself like someone who noticed everything. Walter introduced her. This is Rachel. She shook my hand. I knew your grandmother. Grandpa looked surprised. I thought you left the state. I did. What brought you back? She reached into her backpack. Without saying a word, she placed a thick manila folder on the table. I finally found him. The room became silent. Grandpa whispered, Who? Rachel answered, The construction foreman. His name was Daniel Cross. He'd vanished almost 5 months earlier. Officially, unofficially, Rachel had tracked him to a small town nearly 300 miles away. He changed his name, changed his appearance, even dyed his hair. What did he tell you? Grandpa asked. Rachel hesitated. He wouldn't talk. So how do you know it's him? Because someone killed him yesterday. Nobody spoke. She continued. The local police called it a robbery. It wasn't. His house wasn't touched. What was? Rachel opened the folder. Inside were crime scene photographs. Daniel Cross had been sitting in his kitchen. Coffee still on the table. Nothing stolen. One thing caught my attention. On the wall behind him, someone had painted a black circle with 3 white lines. The same symbol from Grandpa's photograph. Grandpa leaned back in his chair. They're cleaning up. Rachel nodded. Anyone who knows too much. Walter swallowed hard. It means we're running out of time. Rachel had spent 15 years working as an investigator for an insurance company. Finding missing people. Exposing fraud. Following financial trails. She wasn't guessing. She'd been tracing shell companies connected to the mysterious construction project. Every company dissolved within months. Every employee vanished. Every payment ended in cash. No paper trail remained. Except one. She pulled out a map. I found where the money started. She pointed toward Pine Ridge. Not the compound. The old mining district. Grandpa's expression changed immediately. No. Rachel nodded. Yes. The abandoned Silver Ridge mine. I recognized the name. The mine had been closed for decades after a collapse. Nobody went there anymore. Except hikers. And apparently, someone else. We're going tonight, Rachel said. Grandpa stood instantly. No. We finally have a lead. It's exactly what they want. They already know we're looking. They always know. Rachel crossed her arms. Then hiding won't save us. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Finally, Grandpa looked at me. You stay here. I almost laughed. Not happening. That evening, just before sunset, the 4 of us left in 2 vehicles. Walter drove ahead. Rachel followed. Grandpa sat beside me. No one talked much. The roads grew narrower. Eventually the pavement disappeared. We followed an old logging trail deep into the forest. The trees blocked most of the fading sunlight. It felt like entering another world. After nearly 40 minutes, Walter stopped. The mine's another mile on foot. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No birds. No insects. Only our footsteps. Grandpa suddenly raised his hand. Stop! Everyone froze. Fresh tire tracks. Wide ones. Heavy vehicles. Rachel knelt beside them. Less than 12 hours old. Walter whispered. Nobody uses this road. Grandpa answered. They do. The Silver Ridge, mine, finally came into view. Or what remained of it. Collapsed buildings. Rusted equipment. Broken conveyor belts. Nature had reclaimed almost everything. Except one building. A concrete warehouse. It looked newer. Much newer. Its large steel door was closed. No windows. Gray walls. Just like the structures in Grandpa's photographs. Rachel looked at Grandpa. You were right. He didn't look satisfied. He looked terrified. We approached carefully. Halfway there, a sound echoed through the valley. Metal striking metal. Once. Twice. Then silence. Walter whispered. Someone's inside. Rachel motioned for everyone to stay low. She reached the warehouse first. The steel door wasn't locked. She pulled gently. It opened 2 inches. Cold air rushed out. The smell. I'll never forget it. Bleach. Oil. And something metallic. Like old blood. We slipped inside. Flashlights illuminated a massive underground loading area. The warehouse was empty. No machinery. No workers. Only dozens of fresh tire marks. Wooden pallets. And stacks of identical gray crates. The same size Walter had described. My heart raced. One crate stood open. Empty. Rachel examined the labels. There aren't any. Grandpa pointed his flashlight toward the far wall. There, hidden behind several crates, was a freight elevator. Its doors stood open, leading down, much farther down. Walter stared into the darkness. That wasn't here before. Rachel whispered. We're not alone. Footsteps. Below us. Coming up. Fast. Move. Grandpa shoved me behind a stack of crates. The elevator began rising. Its motor groaned through the silence. Floor numbers blinked upward. -3. -2. -1. The platform reached our level. The doors slid open. A man stepped out wearing dark gray coveralls. He froze. We froze. For one long second. Nobody moved. Then his eyes locked onto Grandpa. Recognition. Pure panic. He spun around and ran. Rachel shouted. Stop! She chased him. Walter followed. I started after them. Grandpa grabbed my arm. No! But it's a trap. Too late. The warehouse lights exploded on. Blinding white. A loud electronic voice echoed through the building. Unauthorized entry detected. Heavy steel doors slammed shut behind us. The entire warehouse began to shake. And somewhere deep below, something enormous started moving. The entire warehouse trembled beneath our feet. A deep mechanical rumble echoed from somewhere below, vibrating through the concrete floor until it settled in my chest. Every instinct screamed at me to run. There was only one problem. There was nowhere to go. The massive steel door behind us had sealed shut. Rachel had disappeared down a side corridor, chasing the man in gray coveralls. Walter stood frozen near the freight elevator. Grandpa grabbed my shoulder. Stay close. The calmness in his voice made me even more afraid. Red emergency lights replaced the bright white overhead lights. The warehouse was suddenly bathed in an eerie crimson glow. A computerized voice repeated itself. Security protocol activated. Please remain where you are. Then another voice. A human voice. Male. Calm. Almost polite. Frank Sullivan. Grandpa's jaw tightened. I wondered how long it would take before you came back. The voice echoed through hidden speakers. You've been very difficult to convince. A door opened on the far side of the warehouse. A tall man in a charcoal suit walked out alone. No weapon. No body armor. Nothing that suggested he felt threatened. He looked to be around 60. Gray hair. Perfect posture. His expression carried the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. He smiled. You've aged. Grandpa didn't smile back. I know you. We've met. When? The day you wandered where you shouldn't have. My heart skipped. This was the first person we'd encountered who admitted knowing Grandpa. Rachel reappeared from the hallway. Empty-handed. He got away. The man in the suit nodded politely. Of course he did. You planned that. I planned all of this. Walter whispered. I don't like this. Neither did I. The stranger looked directly at me. You must be his grandson. I said nothing. He loves you very much. Grandpa stepped in front of me. Leave him out of this. I intended to. His smile faded. You refused. My name is Victor Hale. He spoke as though introducing himself at a business conference. I oversee this facility. What facility? Rachel demanded. Victor glanced around the warehouse. You've spent months trying to answer that question. And I'm afraid the answer would disappoint you. Rachel crossed her arms. Try me. Victor sighed. 25 years ago, this mine was purchased through a federal redevelopment program. Walter interrupted. There are no records. There aren't supposed to be. What are you hiding? Victor looked almost amused. Nothing illegal. None of us believed him. Grandpa spoke quietly. What happened to Emily? For the first time, Victor's expression changed. Not guilt. Regret. I warned her. You murdered her. No. You expect us to believe that? I expected nothing. Victor took a slow breath. Emily refused to stop investigating. So you silenced her. I tried to protect her. Rachel laughed bitterly. That's a new one. Victor ignored her. She stole classified documents. Grandpa stared. She panicked. She drove too fast. The road was wet. She died before anyone reached her. No one ordered her death. Silence filled the warehouse. I wanted to reject everything he was saying, but he wasn't speaking like a liar. He sounded like a man carrying a burden he'd never escaped. Victor motioned toward the freight elevator. If you want answers, he stepped inside. Come see them. The doors remained open. Waiting. Rachel looked at Grandpa. It's another trap. Grandpa nodded. I know. Then, to my surprise, he stepped onto the elevator. We're done guessing. The ride downward lasted nearly a full minute. The digital display continued falling. -4. -5. -6. Far deeper than any abandoned mine should have gone. When the doors finally opened, I forgot how to breathe. The underground complex stretched farther than I could see. Bright lights, medical labs, computer rooms, storage areas, people walking calmly through spotless hallways. Nothing looked military. Nothing looked abandoned. It looked like a research campus built beneath a mountain. Victor led us into a conference room. Maps covered one wall. Satellite images covered another. In the center sat a scale model of Pine Ridge. Grandpa whispered, My God! Victor folded his hands. This valley has a geological instability. Rachel frowned. What does that mean? It means the ground beneath Pine Ridge is collapsing. He pointed toward a series of underground caverns. Old mining tunnels. Natural faults. Underground rivers. He pressed a button. Several sections of the model lit up red. If these chambers fail, he looked at each of us. Half the town disappears. Nobody spoke. Victor continued. Our project exists to prevent that. Walter shook his head. Then why all the secrecy? Because once land values collapse, he pointed toward the town again, everyone leaves. So, businesses fail. Banks fail. Insurance companies refuse coverage. The town dies before the ground ever collapses. Rachel narrowed her eyes. So you're lying to everyone. We're buying time. Grandpa looked furious. You terrorized innocent people. Victor nodded once. That was never my instruction. You followed me. Yes. You watched my home. Yes. You destroyed my life. Victor looked genuinely ashamed. Some of my people believed fear would keep you away. It didn't. No. It only convinced you we were something worse. I finally asked the question that had haunted me. What about the people in the crates? Victor stared at me. They weren't prisoners. He opened another file. Emergency rescue teams. Medical personnel. Engineers. They arrived through concealed transport to avoid public attention. Walter slowly sat down. I know what you thought. Rachel wasn't convinced. Then explained Daniel Cross. Victor's face darkened. He violated security. He tried selling classified engineering plans. So someone killed him. No. Victor pressed another button. Security footage appeared. Daniel sitting alone, holding a pistol, crying. Then, the footage ended. Victor looked away. He took his own life. Rachel stared silently at the screen. She'd spent months believing it was murder. So why cover it up? She whispered. Victor answered honestly. Because Public panic would have destroyed the project. Nobody seemed satisfied with that answer. Least of all Grandpa. Grandpa stood. You could have trusted us. Victor smiled sadly. History says otherwise. Just then, alarms blared. Real alarms, not security alarms. Engineers began running through the hallway. Someone shouted, "Section 12 is failing." Victor's expression changed instantly. What happened? Water pressure exceeded projections. Another engineer ran into the room. We're losing the eastern support columns. Victor turned toward us. I wish we'd had more time. The floor shook violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. This wasn't staged. This was real. The next hour became complete chaos. Engineers evacuated lower levels. Emergency teams rushed toward the damaged tunnel. Grandpa looked around. They're undermanned. Victor nodded. We lost half our crew last month. Without hesitation, Grandpa grabbed an old hard hat hanging near the exit. I spent 43 years underground. Victor looked surprised. You still remember the layouts? Grandpa smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. I probably know this mountain better than you do. For the next 3 hours, I watched my 81-year-old grandfather become the man everyone in Pine Ridge used to admire. He directed crews, read structural maps, predicted weak points, even corrected engineers half his age. Walter joined him. Rachel coordinated evacuations. I carried equipment wherever they needed it. No one cared who worked for whom anymore. Only surviving mattered. Just before dawn, the shaking stopped. An exhausted silence filled the tunnels. One by one, people began clapping. The collapse had been contained. Not permanently, but long enough. Pine Ridge would survive. Outside, the sunrise painted the mountains gold. Grandpa sat on the hood of my SUV, completely exhausted. Victor walked over. You saved thousands of people. Grandpa looked toward town. No, I saved my home. Victor handed him a thick envelope. Everything. Inside were engineering reports, government approvals, financial records, every document Grandpa had spent months trying to uncover. No more secrets. Victor said quietly, We've made enough mistakes. 3 months later, the federal government publicly announced the Pine Ridge Stabilization Project. Independent engineers confirmed the geological danger. Construction became visible. Roads closed. Heavy equipment arrived in daylight instead of darkness. People were angry at first, then relieved. At least they finally knew the truth. Deputy Miles resigned shortly afterward, not because he'd committed a crime, because he'd followed orders without asking whether they were right. Rachel wrote the story that Emily never got to finish. Only this time, it was backed by documents instead of suspicion. Walter finally slept through an entire night for the first time in months. As for Grandpa, he tore the steel bars off his windows himself. The heavy locks disappeared. The police scanner went back into storage. One Saturday morning, I walked into his kitchen. The smell made me smile. Blueberry pancakes. Exactly like when I was a kid. Grandpa laughed. I figured we deserved something normal. We carried our plates onto the front porch. The same porch where he'd once pulled me inside in terror. The rocking chairs creaked gently in the morning breeze. For the first time in a long while, no black SUVs, no strange visitors, no fear, just birds singing in the oak tree. Grandpa looked at me with tears quietly filling his eyes. I'm sorry you got dragged into all this. I shook my head. If I hadn't shown up, you would have kept carrying it alone. He smiled. Maybe. I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. You taught me something. What's that? Sometimes the people who seem paranoid are just the only ones paying attention. He laughed so hard that tears rolled down his cheeks. It was the same laugh I remembered from childhood. The laugh I'd been afraid was gone forever. And hearing it again was worth every terrifying moment that had brought me back to Pine Ridge.